week 4 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few kickers I have as sleepers this week. The first guy is Greg Joseph of the Minnesota Vikings. So far this season, Greg Joseph, he's been a pretty good kicker for this Viking team. Something they've lacked over the last few seasons with inconsistencies. Week 1 at Cincinnati, 8 fantasy points. Week 2 at the Arizona Cardinals, 9 fantasy points. And week 3 versus the Seattle Seahawks, 13 fantasy points. And right here in week 4 versus the Cleveland Browns, I think Joseph, he could get a couple extra points in this ball game. I think he'll hit 2 or 3 field goals, and I think he reaches double digits in this one, because this Brown defense is a bend but don't break type of D, and this Viking offense is very explosive, and they were in the red zone a lot this season. So Joseph here, I think he reaches double digits, and he's still available as well in 93% of fantasy leagues. The next kicker I have is a sleeper this week's Aldrich Rosas of the New Orleans Saints, of the former New York Giant, versus his former team this week. Here's Rojas. So far this season, he's done nothing really for fantasy owners. Week 1 versus the Packers, 9 points. Week 2 at the Panthers, 1 point. And week 3 at the Patriots, only 3 fantasy points in that one. So right here, we'll see what he could do versus the New York Giants, his Rosas' former team. But the Giants do give up the 9th most fantasy points to kickers. And right here, I think the Saints, they're going to have to settle a few times in the red zone, because their offense really don't punch the ball in the end zone as much as it did, obviously, with Drew Brees for all those seasons and Michael Thomas when he was healthy. But Rosas versus former team, I think he's want to go out there and have a decent ball game and hit all his field goals after last week missing 2 of them. So right here, I think he could get anywhere from 7 to 10 fantasy points in this one versus the Giants. And he's still available in 99% of fantasy leagues. And the third and final kicker I have as a sleeper this week's Randy Bullock of the Tennessee Titans. So the Titans got a great matchup versus the New York Jets, who give up the 6th most fantasy points to kickers so far this season. And Bullock so far, he's had ups and downs this year. Week 1 versus the Arizona Cardinals, no fantasy points. Week 2 at the Seattle Seahawks, 15 fantasy points. And week 3 versus the Indianapolis Colts, 5 fantasy points. But this week here, the Titans are going to be out with A.J. Brown and possibly Julio Jones. And those guys are guys who finish in the red zone, obviously. So in this game, they might have to settle for a few field goals as Tennessee, or he'll just have a bunch of extra points or 1 or 2 field goals. So either way, it's a great matchup. And he's also available in 99% of fantasy leagues. So that's a few kickers I have as sleepers here for week 4 of the fantasy football season.